He arrested over 3,000 criminals, shot 14 men dead in gunfights, rode through hell for 32 years, and was never wounded, not even once. He disguised himself as an outlaw to catch outlaws. He walked into ambushes and walked out with his prisoners in chains. He even arrested his own son for murder. Hollywood made movies about him, but they changed one crucial detail. They made him white, because the truth was too hard to believe. The greatest lawman in Wild West history was a black man, a former slave. And his real story is more badass than any movie ever made. This is the legend they erased from history. His name was Bass Reeves, and you're about to find out why outlaws had a saying, "If Bass Reeves is on your trail, start running and don't stop until you hit Mexico." The year is 1875. The Indian Territory, a lawless wasteland stretching across what we now call Oklahoma. It's a place where outlaws go to disappear, where justice is a foreign word, and where the average lawman's life expectancy is measured in weeks, not years. Into this hell rides a man unlike any the West has ever seen, 6'2", built like an oak tree, riding a massive stallion with 2 Colt .45 strapped to his hips and a Winchester rifle across his saddle. But here's what makes him different, what makes his story almost impossible to believe. He's black, a former slave, and he was about to become the most feared U.S. Marshal in American history. This is the true story of Bass Reeves, the man who arrested over 3,000 criminals, who killed 14 men in gunfights and never once was wounded. The man who inspired the Lone Ranger legend, though history tried to forget his name. This isn't some Hollywood fantasy. Every word you're about to hear actually happened, and it's more incredible than any Western film ever made. Act 1. Chains to Freedom, July 1838, Crawford County, Arkansas. Bass Reeves was born into chains. His mother was a slave. His father was a slave. And according to the laws of the time, that meant Bass would be a slave too. Property of William Steele Reeves, a wealthy planter and politician. For the first 23 years of his life, Bass knew nothing but servitude. He worked the fields, he tended horses. He learned to shoot because his owner enjoyed hunting and needed someone to carry his guns. But Bass was different. He was smart, observant. He learned to read by watching white children do their lessons. He memorized the land around him, developing an almost supernatural sense of direction. And when he held a gun, something clicked. Bass could shoot. Not just well, phenomenally. He could hit a target from distances that seemed impossible. He could draw faster than men who'd been gunfighters their whole lives. It was a gift, one that would save his life more times than he could count. But in 1861, everything changed. The Civil War erupted. William Reeves, Bass's owner, joined the Confederate Army as a colonel. And like many Confederate officers, he brought his slaves with him. Bass became his body servant, responsible for tending his horses, cooking his meals, and yes, handling his weapons. Now imagine this. You're a slave, forced to fight for the side trying to keep you enslaved. You're in the middle of a war zone, surrounded by violence and death. And one day, during a card game behind the Confederate lines, your owner hits you. Maybe it was over a bad hand. Maybe Bass said something he shouldn't have. The historical record isn't clear. But what is clear is this. Bass Reeves hit him back. And in 1862, a slave striking his master meant only one thing: death. So Bass ran. He fled into Indian Territory, the wild, untamed land across the Arkansas border. The Confederates searched for him. They sent dogs. They sent posses. But Bass had grown up in these woods. He knew how to disappear. For the next 3 years, while the Civil War raged, Bass Reeves lived among the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole tribes. They took him in, protected him, taught him their languages, skills that would later make him invaluable as a lawman. He learned to track, to survive on nothing, to read the land like other men read books. And when 1865 came, when the Emancipation Proclamation finally reached Arkansas, Bass Reeves walked out of those woods a free man. He was 27 years old, and his real story was just beginning. Act 2. The Call. For the next 10 years, Bass tried to live a normal life. He married Nellie Jenny from Texas. They built a small farm in Van Buren, Arkansas. They had 10 children, 5 boys, 5 girls. Bass worked as a farmer, a horsebreaker, a scout. But the Indian Territory kept calling to him. See, after the Civil War, the Territory had become something unique in American history. A place with no state law. It was federal land, populated by Native American tribes and governed, in theory, by federal courts. In practice, it was chaos. Outlaws from every state fled there. Murderers, thieves, rapists, the worst criminals in America, all congregating in one massive, lawless wasteland the size of Maine. And the few U.S. Marshals brave enough to venture in, they died fast. Between 1865 and 1875, over 200 deputy marshals were killed in Indian Territory. Shot, stabbed, hanged, beaten to death. It was quite literally the most dangerous law enforcement job in America, which is why in 1875, when Judge Isaac Parker, the famous hanging judge, took over the Western District of Arkansas Federal Court, he needed a different kind of lawman. Parker looked at the death toll and realized something. Sending white lawmen into the territory wasn't working. They stood out. The outlaws saw them coming from miles away. They didn't know the languages, didn't know the land. But Bass Reeves, Bass knew the territory like the back of his hand. He spoke Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole fluently. He could pass as a drifter, a cowboy, a fellow outlaw, and most importantly, he had nothing to prove and everything to gain. Judge Parker offered him a badge. Bass Reeves became one of the first black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi River. He was 37 years old, and he was about to become a legend. Act 3. The Warrant. Picture this. You're a wanted man hiding in the Indian Territory. You've murdered someone in Arkansas, robbed a bank in Kansas, or maybe you're just a cattle rustler trying to lay low. You're sitting in a saloon in some dusty settlement. You feel safe. The law doesn't come here. And even if they do, you'll see them coming. Then the door opens. A massive black man walks in, dressed like a drifter, dust on his coat. 2 days of stubble on his face. He orders whiskey, sits down, doesn't look at anyone. You don't think twice about him. That's your first mistake, because that man is Bass Reeves, and he's been tracking you for 3 weeks. He knows your name, he knows your crimes, and he's got a warrant with your description on it. A warrant he can't read because he never learned how, but his partner read it to him, and Bass never forgets a face. He waits, watches, listens. Then, when the moment is right, you're under arrest. This was Bass's method. He didn't announce himself, didn't give speeches. He used disguises, sometimes dressing as an outlaw, sometimes as a poor farmer, once even as a beggar. One of his most famous arrests went like this. 2 brothers, wanted for murder, were holed up in their mother's cabin deep in the territory. Every lawman who tried to approach got shot at. The place was a fortress. Bass heard they were planning to attend a local dance. So he disguised himself as a drifter looking for work, walked right up to that cabin in broad daylight, knocked on the door. The mother answered. "Mom," Bass said, tipping his hat, "I am looking for some farmhand work. Heard there might be opportunities around here. Could you spare some water for a tired traveler?" She bought it, gave him water, even invited him to sit on the porch. While he sat there making small talk, the two brothers came outside. Bass waited until they were both in the open. Then he stood up, drew both his Colts. "U.S. Marshal, you're both under arrest for murder." The brothers went for their guns. Bad idea. Bass shot the gun out of one brother's hand, put a bullet in the other's shoulder before he could even clear leather. Both arrested. Both lived to stand trial. Bass's motto, "I never killed a man who didn't need killing, and I never shot a man who didn't shoot at me first." Act 4. The Cook. But Bass Reeves wasn't just fast with a gun. He was smart, strategic. He understood something most lawmen didn't. In the Wild West, reputation was everything. And Bass built a reputation that made outlaws nervous. There's a story, confirmed by multiple sources, about a wanted outlaw named Jim Webb. Webb was a stone-cold killer. He'd murdered multiple men. He was fast, mean, and smart. When he heard Bass Reeves was coming for him, he didn't run. He waited. Webb set up an ambush along the trail he knew Bass would take. Found a perfect spot, a narrow canyon with high rocks on both sides. He positioned himself up high with a rifle. Perfect angle, perfect cover. He waited 3 hours in the burning sun. Finally, he heard it. Hoofbeats. A rider came into view. Big man, black, 2 pistols. Had to be Reeves. Webb aimed, finger on the trigger. Then he noticed something. The rider was wearing Bass's hat, Bass' coat, riding a horse that looked like Bass's stallion. But it wasn't Bass. It was a decoy, one of Bass's informants, wearing his clothes, paid to ride ahead. Webb hesitated. That hesitation saved his life, because at that exact moment, Bass Reeves appeared behind him, on foot, having climbed up the rocks from the other side. "Drop the rifle, Jim." Webb spun around, went for his pistol. Bass's Colt was already drawn. I said, "Drop it." Webb looked into Bass's eyes, and for the first time in his criminal life, Jim Webb surrendered without a fight. Later, in court, someone asked Webb why he gave up. "I looked at Bass Reeves," Webb said, "and I knew. I knew if I pulled that trigger, I was a dead man. He had me. Fair and square." Act 5. The impossible arrest. But the story that really shows you who Bass Reeves was, the one that separates legend from reality, happened in 1884. Bass received a warrant. Murder, Indian Territory. He read the name. Well, someone read it to him. His face went stone cold. The wanted man was his own son, Benny Reeves. Now, understand what this means. In the Wild West, family was everything. Blood was everything. Lawmen routinely looked the other way when their relatives got in trouble. It was expected, accepted. But Bass Reeves wasn't like other lawmen. Benny had gotten into a fight, shot a man. Maybe it was self-defense, maybe it wasn't. But there was a warrant, and Bass had a job to do. His wife begged him, "Here's your son, our son." Bass looked at her with tears in his eyes. And him a U.S. Marshal. I swore an oath. He tracked his own son for 2 weeks, through forests, across rivers, into the deepest parts of the territory where Benny thought he'd be safe. Bass found him camping near the Canadian River. "Benny," he called out, "it's your father. I've got a warrant for your arrest." Benny came out, hands up. He knew his father, knew there was no running. No fighting. I'm sorry, Pa. Bass' voice cracked. I'm sorry too, son. He put his own son in handcuffs, brought him in. Benny stood trial, was convicted of manslaughter, served his time, and Bass Reeves, he went right back to work. Because that's who he was. The law wasn't just a job for Bass. It was sacred. It was the thing that made him different from the outlaws he hunted. A freed slave who became the ultimate symbol of justice in the wildest corner of America. Act 6, The Long Ride. Over 32 years, Bass Reeves did what no other lawman could do. He arrested over 3,000 criminals. Read that again. 3,000. Bank robbers, murderers, cattle rustlers, rapists. Some of the most dangerous men in American history. He killed 14 men in gunfights, and every single one was ruled justified self-defense. He was shot at countless times. His hat was shot off. His belt was shot. His saddle. His horse was killed under him twice. But Bass himself, never wounded, not once. Some people called it luck. Others called it divine protection. Bass called it paying attention. He rode tens of thousands of miles across the territory. Sometimes he'd be gone for months, living off the land, sleeping under stars, tracking gangs through impossible terrain. He once brought in 17 prisoners at the same time. 17. Chained together, riding for days through hostile territory, with Bass alone guarding them. Another time, he walked 30 miles through a blizzard to serve a warrant, because his horse had gone lame. The outlaws feared him. The honest folks loved him. The other marshals respected him. And the criminals, they had a saying. If Bass Reeves is on your trail, you got two choices. Turn yourself in or start running and don't stop until you hit Mexico. Act 7, The Changing Times. But even legends can't stop time. By 1907, the Indian Territory was changing. Oklahoma was becoming a state. Federal marshals were being phased out in favor of local police. Bass Reeves was 69 years old. He'd spent 32 years riding through hell. He'd seen the Wild West transform from a lawless frontier into something resembling civilization, and he'd been a huge part of that transformation. When Oklahoma achieved statehood, Bass did something that shocked everyone. He became a police officer in Muskogee, Oklahoma, a beat cop, walking the streets, checking doors at night. Some people thought it was a step down. From legendary U.S. Marshal to small-town policeman. But Bass saw it differently. I started as nothing, he said, a slave with no rights, no future, no hope. I became a free man, then a lawman. Now I'm protecting people in their own homes. That's not a step down, that's progress. He worked as a police officer for 2 years, and even in his 70s, nobody messed with Bass Reeves. Final act, The Legacy, January 12, 1910. Muskogee, Oklahoma. Bass Reeves died of Bright's disease, kidney failure. He was 71 years old. His funeral was packed. White people, black people, Native Americans, rich, poor, lawmen, former outlaws who'd reformed. They all came to pay respects to a man who treated everyone the same, with fairness and with firmness and with honor. The newspapers ran obituaries, but they were small, brief, because America in 1910 wasn't ready to celebrate a black hero, wasn't ready to admit that one of the greatest lawmen in American history was a former slave. So Bass Reeves faded from memory. His stories were told, but his name was forgotten. Some historians believe he was the real inspiration for the Lone Ranger, a masked lawman with a faithful companion who rode the Wild West, bringing justice. But they made the Lone Ranger white, made his companion Tonto Native American. They erased Bass Reeves from his own legend. For decades, his name appeared only in dusty court records, in forgotten newspaper archives, in the fading memories of the few people who'd known him. But the truth has a way of surviving. In recent years, historians have rediscovered Bass Reeves, have uncovered his incredible record, have shared his story with a new generation. And now, finally, people are learning about the man who arrested over 3,000 criminals, killed 14 men in self-defense gunfights, never was wounded in 32 years of service, arrested his own son to uphold the law, spoke multiple Native American languages, used disguises and strategy like a Wild West detective. Did all of this while facing racism, discrimination, and a society that told him he was less than human. Bass Reeves proved them wrong. He didn't just become a lawman. He became the lawman, the gold standard, the legend, a former slave who rose to become the most feared and respected U.S. Marshal in American history. So next time you watch a Western movie, remember this: the fastest draw, the bravest Marshal, the man who always got his criminal and never compromised his principles. He was real. His name was Bass Reeves, and his story, the true story, is more incredible than any Hollywood script. This is the Wild West they didn't teach you in school. This is the legend they tried to forget. This is Bass Reeves.